Hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi.
I am, okay, now we know we're on. We got that handle.
Yes.
And yeah, so we'll wait for everyone to join. Hey, Cynthia. I'm on Instagram Live on my personal account.
Okay.
I want everybody to join. Hey guys, this is Maya. Say
Hi. It's always so weird.
We're about to talk all things podcast.
Yes, we are. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
It's like so weird recording on the computer because like you're here but the camera's here, so I'm like, where am I looking?
Okay.
With a podcast, I don't have to worry about a camera.
Yes. I want to talk about that too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot of podcasts, they have, they record on YouTube as well.
So yeah, that is definitely something that's just like that's your prerogative if you want to. I have done a recorded podcast through video one time, and it was like just like a trial run.
Yeah.
And it's very important to have two cameras going on at one time because the guy that I work with just had one, so it was like all profile.
Yeah.
You couldn't see my face or anything like that. So like my favorite example to bring up is like Dear White People, how they record that scene when Sam is in the studio talking and they have like different angles. That's how you should try and record your podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we have someone has already joined early. Yes, early bird gets the worm.
Yes, welcome.
Hey.
Let's see, let's bring up the Q&As.
So once you join, say where you're from, what you're doing. Yes, Cynthia, we are doing a webinar, how to start a podcast. Just join by clicking the link in Black Rose Media page on, it says join a webinar, and that link will take you to the webinar. And of course it is free.
Yes, we love free things.
Yeah. Free knowledge, you can't beat that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And you have like the presentation, everything set up?
Yep, everything is all good to go. So whenever, when more people fill in and we want to start, I'll just share my screen with everyone.
Okay, great. Cool beans. And what is everyone doing over on Instagram? What are y'all up to?
So how many of these webinars have you had? I know there was the resume one. Was there one after that too, or?
No, this is the second one.
Oh, this is such an honor.
This is the second one, and the first one went really well. We had about 80 participants.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how this one goes because I'm sure like a lot of people, especially these days, a lot of people want to start their own podcast. I've even been into it. And just anything I do with Black Girls in Media, I learn from it as well. Like, so
right.
It's fun.
No, it's definitely really cool. And I think it's important just like we were saying before, having these free resources because there are a lot of like webinars in general that cost like $100 a session. You're like, I can't afford that.
Exactly. So yes, thank you so much for being on here.
Of course, I'm excited. As much as I can like spread any kind of knowledge, I'm here for it.
And where do you live right now?
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so and I totally forgot that you were on the West Coast because when you said one, I was like, did I say something wrong? And I'm like, oh, that's right, she's not on this coast.
Yes, I forget that all the time. It's crazy. Okay.
So, because this is recorded, like, where does it kind of live after all of this?
So we will be sending out the replay via email.
Okay.
But Also, I just thought about it. It does download as an MP4, so I could always post it on our YouTube channel as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then like, I can, if you want to forward me that, I'll promote it and all of that as well.
Definitely. Will do.
I am like slowly starting to prepare for vacation. My birthday is on Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
So this was a nice gift as well. So like behind me is like all kinds of stuff on the floor, and I like push it off my bed. I was like, they can't see this.
Yeah, where are you going?
I'm going to New Orleans.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm very excited. And like my mom's birthday is on Saturday, so this is like a combined trip for both of us.
Oh, that's so fun. It's just you two, or?
So it's my mom, my dad, and my boyfriend and I. So like a couple's trip. Yes. And so it's much needed vacation.
Oh, definitely. You travel a lot?
A little more now. I'm getting into it because one, I have a job that supports the travel, and it also gives me like unlimited time to travel. So, and working in social media and marketing, I can kind of take my work on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I am like out of Jersey, I can still, be part of whatever's happening at work. So it's cool. But I definitely want to travel more. Like I've been to New Orleans 3 times, but I love it so much that I can't stay away.
Yeah, it's super fun. I went when I was like 21, but that was like a few years ago, so it's definitely time to go back.
Yes, and I've never been around like Halloween, so I hear it's a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, super fun. Well, this is your pre-birthday turn up.
Yes, I'm excited. Like this was like a good rollout to the birthday celebration.
Yes. We have one more minute when everyone joins. Hello.
Hi guys, I see people joined.
We have Constance, Amaka. Hi.
So we definitely encourage you to be very active in the chat. Tell me where you're from. What are you guys hoping to hear about today? I'm excited to talk all things podcast with you.
Yes. So everyone say where you are right now, what you're doing. Let's just talk in the chat. We'll give it about 5 minutes before everyone joins.
We'll do the awkward icebreakers that everyone has to do when they first meet someone.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go live on, hey ladies from New York. I'm hoping to learn how to get started with podcasting and hopefully get some inspiration to begin one soon. Yes. New Jersey, New York.
Yay, Jersey, New York, welcome family.
Constance and I'm from Richmond, Virginia. And you can see the chat too, right, Maya?
Let me see. Oh, there it is. Yep, I see it.
Yes.
Hey, New York, it's Jersey. Oh, Virginia, hello. The DMV is always great.
Yes.
So, also let me know what you guys want to hear about. And any kind of questions you can drop as we go. If you want to wait till the end, that's perfectly up to you. And I'll try to answer all of your questions as thoroughly as possible. But I really want to give a big thank you to everyone who has signed up. And this is exciting. This is my first webinar, so
Yes.
I am the guinea pig for this. And to the one call-in listener, I see you. Thank you for joining.
Okay, we'll give it about 3 more minutes.
Awesome.
Everyone get your questions ready.
Yes, any pens and paper or your notes app in your phone, get ready, because I'm going to try and drop a lot of gems for you guys today, because podcasting, it's a big topic, so I hope I'm able to squeeze it into something easy to consume. I love this background, Tasha. Like, where are you at right now?
I wish it was my room, but it's the co-working spot that I work at.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the walls.
I love it. It's great. Yes, this is being recorded, and Tasha, I believe they will have the link in an email after this, so you can actually share this with a few friends as well.
What do you do when you have requests to go live?
Oh.
Should I approve it on Instagram? Let's see. I've never done it.
I've never done it either. I'm not like much of a live person.
We have 1 minute.
Yeah.
So let's see what this. Hello. Okay. Maybe it's not. All right. Cool. Well, I will pop this up. Get started.
Oh. Oh, I like see myself in the reflection of your phone. I was like, what is that?
We have one more that joined. Oh, yeah, call-in listener.
Yes, a call-in listener.
I hope you can hear us. That's awesome.
Yes, please be active in the chat. Let us know if we're glitching or anything like that. Helps us out too.
Definitely. All right. Well, it is 4:35. What is the panel of social media? Oh, yes. So we will share everything at the end. You can go ahead and put your Instagram in case anyone wants to tag you in the meantime, Maya.
Yeah, I'll write it in. I'll send it to you guys.
Okay, push it in the chat. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely, is it Monday?
It is still Monday.
My days are all mixed up, but yes. Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a great Monday, a great start to the week. And we have the lovely Maya Harris joining us today, and she is the host of her podcast, Maya's Moment. She is from Jersey, and she's an ambassador for Black Girls in Media. And she is just the epitome of, a Black woman sharing her gifts and being creative with everything that she does. So we had to have her on the team, and she's willing on her birthday week to share some knowledge to you all as far as podcasting goes. So I will give the floor to her in the meantime, and yeah.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. So yes, as she said, my name is Maya Harris. I am actually the host of a podcast called That Moment When with Maya Harris, but Maya's Moment is the title of my blog, so mayasmoment.com. Maya spelled like Maya Angelou. And yes, as she said, this is my birthday weekend. My birthday is on Wednesday, October 16th. So please don't mind any packing travel situation you may see in the background. I'm going away for my birthday. I'm very excited to talk about how to start a podcast with all of you. Please be active in the chat. Ask all the questions that you want to. I will try and get to them as we go through each slide, or I can do them all at the end. But please ask away. But before we start, I want to know how many of you already have a podcast. So I think that there's going to be a poll that is going to pop up soon, and I'm just want to know if you guys have a podcast already, yes or no.
Okay. And
Awesome. There's the poll. This is so exciting. And so, while you guys are filtering your answers in there, this podcast is going to be about leveraging your voice and your vision and, just finding ways to share what you have in your head, put it out there in a podcast, on a microphone for everyone to hear. So you guys can see my screen right now. Just if you can't, just in the chat, just let me know if you can, and I'll figure that out for you. But yeah, so we're going to start the webinar on how to start a podcast.
Yes. Okay. So let's see you ready to see the results?
Hold on. Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Okay, so 33% of you do have a podcast and 67% don't have one yet. Keyword is yet. So I'm going to come right back to those numbers, just introduce myself a little bit more. I'm Maya. I am a New Jersey, New York-based digital marketer, on-air personality, and I host events and panels. I've always been super curious when it comes to storytelling. My mom used to have this really old-timey radio, and it used to play NPR, and every morning that would wake me up. So I was literally woken up by storytelling, and I really wanted to do something with that. And I wanted to create a space that advocates for self-care and self-love. And this mission and idea helped me launch my bi-weekly podcast called That Moment When with Maya Harris in November of 2018, a week after the midterm elections. So I feel like we needed a bunch of self-care and rejuvenating after all of that hecticness that can come with that. But think about your social media use. When you scroll through social media, you're constantly seeing the highlights. You're seeing people's promotions, people's engagements, people having babies and all these great things, and people running successful businesses. But rarely do you see the lowlights of a situation, or the downtimes when someone is really breaking down or crying. And we know as people, we are a balance of good and bad. So I thought that this podcast would be a really great platform to leverage the L's, which I say are lessons, not losses, because you either win or you learn, and either way you're winning. And I want people to celebrate those L's, those lessons in life, as well as the W's, and appreciate the moments that make us who we are, for better or for worse. So to get back onto the poll that we just took and talk about the results there, why are podcasts so popular? So a lot of you who have said, 33% that said that you do have a podcast, I know that you have obviously listened to podcasts, and those who are thinking about it, you have listened to some as well. So why are we listening to podcasts? Why is there something that we can just plug into and just listen to, zone out? Because podcasts are so easy to consume. You don't have to put it down and focus. You don't have to put something down and focus on it like a book or a television show. You don't have to stop your entire life to consume it. So I don't have a poll for this, but if you want to drop it in the chat, where are some places that you listen to podcasts the most? Is it on a commute? Is it maybe you're just taking a walk, you're chilling at home? Where are some places that podcasts really are in your space a majority of the time? So make sure you drop that in the chat. Be very active as you can. And podcasts are easily accessible from anywhere, from any device. So it can be on your computer, your laptop, your tablet, your smartphone. It's very easy to just plug in, hook up to Bluetooth, and just rock out. So let me see. So you sneak it in at work. I do the same. I sneak podcasts in at work. Morning commutes are incredible. Is that my New York person? Those morning commutes, you definitely need a podcast going when you're taking the subway, because also MTA can be a pain in the butt. Your work or at home while cleaning, I feel like listening to anything, whether it's podcasting or music, just helps the cleaning go by faster. When you're driving, I love that. When I'm taking road trips, I really like to listen to podcasts because one, it can calm me down as I'm maybe taking a long drive to somewhere that I haven't been before, but it's also entertaining. And if you're listening to a podcast with maybe someone who's driving with you in the passenger seat, it can cause great conversation. I've had plenty of conversations with topics from podcasts that just bring up incredible debates with the person that I'm driving with. And last but not least, podcasts are so popular because it creates an intimate relationship between the host and the listener. Think of a podcast that you're really, really in love with. Do you follow the host on social media? Do you buy any of the merchandise that the podcast may release? Do you go to any of their live shows? You're doing it because you trust them as a source. You may like their personality. You also just really support what they do. And that creates an intimate relationship that is really trusting between host and the audience, which is a key to keep in mind because I'm going to talk about that later on why that is so important. So why start a podcast? You want to tell a story, talk about a topic that you like, explore a passion or a field. Maybe you came across something that you're really interested, like, I don't know, dinosaurs, because Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies. And you really want to take a deep look into dinosaurs and you're like really, really passionate about it, go for it. Maybe it's something to do with a friend or by yourself. A friend suggested that I should. How many times have you been out to brunch with someone and over bottomless mimosas, your friend is like, yo, you're funny, you need a podcast, start one. That's a very valid reason to start one. So also, please let me know why you guys want to start a podcast. Is it any one of these? Is it something different? Let me know. And for those who are entrepreneurs or maybe they are working with a brand, a podcast is a great way to leverage your business or brand. So also please drop that in the chat because I'm very excited to hear why you guys want to embark on this amazing journey that is the podcast world. And what we're going to be talking about today are a lot of key things that you're going to need to know for a podcast. So the first thing that we're going to go over is your demographic. Who is your podcast for? Who is going to be listening? What kind of community do you want to cultivate? Naming your podcast, because just like anything else that you are proud of and that you have love for, the name matters. Your episode format, how do you want your episode to flow? What's the vibe that you want to bring to your episode and your podcast? How to record, how to edit, and last but not least, the things that you need to keep in mind when you're publishing your podcast. So first, we're going to start with who is your podcast for? If you guys could, in the chat, could you just drop the age range that I'm working with and like the demographic, where you guys from, and all of that stuff, so I can get a better idea on where you guys are coming from and maybe help you guys out in building the demographic that you want to target. So why is it important to keep your demographic in mind? Well, when you have a podcast, the main thing that you want to do is to cultivate a community. Like, a following is important when you have a podcast, but it's not the number one thing. Because I understand when you have a podcast, you want someone to listen. You've put a lot of work into it. You put some time into it and some thought and energy. You really want people to hear what you have to say. You don't want to feel like you're screaming into an empty box. So when it comes to the demographic, it's very important to put a face and a name to the person that you want to be with and who you want to talk to. So let's say you want to start a podcast that tends to college students of color. Okay, so let's see. What are some things that you want to keep in mind? Maybe you want to target HBCUs. Maybe you want to target some Black communities on PWIs because they are predominantly white institutions, for those who don't know, because they may be feeling isolated. So through your podcast, you can form a community for them. And what are college students of color really thinking about? Is it how they can leverage their college community to better fit them? Is it trying to bring activities to their college environment, or just how to survive college as a student of color, because their experience is extremely different than the next person? So thinking about that, if you're a sports fan, I'm a basketball fan, any sports fans out there, drop me your favorite sport and your team in the chat. Hopefully we don't get into any arguments about who we like. But if you're a basketball fan, maybe you want to have a podcast for basketball fans who are 20 to 45, because you know maybe 75-year-old lifetime fans won't be listening to your podcast. So try and get them young and try to build a consistent following for them. So a good thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about your demographic is that this will be your fan base. These are going to be people who are going to be, or should be, sticking with you from your first couple episodes to when you feel comfortable enough to have your first live show, celebrate your 1-year anniversary. This is your following. You know, when it comes to social media, we have a following, and that's content that we visually put out there. But for your podcast, this is going to be similar, just on an audio front. And a good thing about this is you don't have to always be in front of a camera like on social media, but you know, you're still getting your personality out there through your voice, and that's really, really great. All right, let's see. We have 22 from New York trying to reach 18 to 30. Okay, now that's great. You have an age range that's a little broad. Let's tighten it up a little bit. Let's see, what is the demographic in terms of race? What about profession? Are these moms? Are these parents? Let's bring it down a little bit more. 23 in DC. Hey, DC. Also 27 in the New York area. Oh my gosh, yes, the New York people are here. I'm a communications professional that is interested in learning new skills. Okay, so what kind of skills do you want here? Are you trying to say how you can use a podcast to maybe leverage your brand? Are you trying to think of ways to enhance your communication skills through a podcast? Let's hear a little bit more about that, and I can definitely try and help you there. The good thing about your podcast is, well, one, I said it's all just audio, but your audio is now your main focus. You know, people aren't going to be seeing your face. They're not going to be seeing your outfits or anything like that. They're going to hear your voice. So everything that comes out of your mouth has to give them a good reason to listen, but not only that, but to keep coming back for more. So let's think of a theme. You know, I talked with the 22-year-old in New York trying to reach 18 to 30. All right, so what is your theme? What's the theme that you want to talk about with these 18 to 30-year-olds? And when you think of a theme, do you have enough for that theme to make sure there's enough to talk about? Can you get 9 to 12 episodes, or 10 to 15 if you're feeling very, very generous for this audience? Looking to start a podcast to share reviews and critiques about print materials, targeting 18 to 35 range on the East Coast. That is very specific, and I love it. I love it. So I will definitely tell you that they're going to do a lot of research on, are there even podcasts that have that share reviews and critiques about print materials? Because if not, you are going to be the unicorn and the authority figure in that kind of topic, which is incredible. It's really good to be the main person in that, because podcasts are so saturated and anyone can start one. And a lot of the topics are repeated. And, you know, for something like that, I have personally never heard of one. If you do know of one, please drop it in the chat. I am very interested on hearing it, but it's extremely great that you have that detailed breakdown of who you want to contact. So, for example, if you guys are still trying to look at or think about ideas or need examples, travel hacks. Travel is very, very big, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's through podcasts, through blogging. And so let's say your idea is travel hacks. Okay, Maya, I want to talk about travel hacks because I love traveling. I love finding easy ways to make traveling a breeze for me. Cool. So each episode should relate to that main topic. For example, what should be in your carry-on? What's the best time to book flights? but make sure that you're providing valuable content for your listeners based on the topics you decide to cover. So for the carry-ons, for example, don't just name I Fly Luggage and Away. Name them both, say why they're so good, but then take it a step further and talk about any personal experience that you have had with whichever carry-on that you're talking about. Let's say that you did something, you have an away carry-on, and you really love that an away carry-on has X, Y, and Z. Talk about each of those experiences, because now you are building trust with your listeners, which is extremely important, as I said before, because now they're going to look to you as an authoritative figure in whatever you're talking about. And it's very good to utilize the description area in your podcast episode. And I will talk a little more about that, where you can find it based on how you upload your podcast. But it's great to talk about a description of what you're going to be talking about in your episode. Drop a couple links to items that you do mention in your podcast. So if you are talking about the away carry-on that you are just in love with, drop a link. And help your audience and guide them through everything that they are listening to. And that's the thing with the podcast. As a podcaster and as a host, you are going to be the guiding voice for your audience. You're going to tell them something, but not just leave them hanging. You're going to tell them something and tell them X, Y, and Z, the why and the how of it all. So formatting your podcast. Before you start to record episodes, before you think of any kind of art that you want to do, you have to think about how your podcast is going to sound and how it's going to be structured. So here are the main types of styles of podcast. There's an interview style, which will be you interviewing someone else, either on air, or you do something pre-recorded and then you just edit it all later on. Solo or a monologue, or more than one co-host. So I do a solo one. That Moment When is a solo podcast. So it's kind of interview style. I'll mix the two. And also you can mix these per episode. Like, it doesn't need to specifically just be one all the way out, but I would not mix more than two together, because it can kind of throw off your listeners after a while. So I combine interview style and solo monologue, and I will interview someone as a guest, and then on some episodes it'll just be me talking about a certain topic that I'm very fond of. You can do a co-host. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the podcast Another Round with Heaven and Tracy. They have gone off the air, but I still listen to their stuff. That's an example. The Read is an example of a co-hosted podcast. Roundtables. So roundtables are going to be a little tricky if you don't have the proper equipment. A roundtable is exactly how it is, a roundtable of more than 2 or 3 people. So what that is you're going to have a topic of an episode, and you're going to have people discuss this topic. It's important, in my opinion, to have people who have different views, so you're not just hearing the same thing over and over again. And it's good to have such a diverse group of people on your round table, because one, it shows that you as a podcast host have the ability to moderate different personalities and different opinions, but also you're open to hearing these things and letting your audience hear different views as well. Obviously, as the co-host, you can put a cap on how wild and radical you want your guests to be, because this is your show, this is your baby. You set the tone at the end of the day. Narrative and storytelling. One of the OG podcasts, and a great podcast if you aren't familiar, is Serial. Not like Cheerios, the cereal you eat, the other cereal. And that was a true crime podcast that really, really kicked off the podcast popularity. And what it was a co-host, it was a host by herself, and she would go out and cover a topic and talk to many people in a documentary narrative storytelling style. So she combined docuseries and narrative storytelling into one, which is a flawless combination if you're thinking about doing that. It does require a little more work, because right now you're taking on the role of a journalist. So you have a platform and now you're going out doing the information, doing all of the research a little more in depth than maybe you would do on a solo monologue where you're just talking about your favorite place to go shopping, you know? And then a hybrid, as I said, is a combination of the types above. Again, I would not go too crazy and put 3 together because it can be a little confusing to keep up with as a listener. So I want to know, which kind of style do you prefer? Do you prefer for your own podcast, or the ones that you really like to listen to? And for those who do have podcasts on here, I was 33% last time. I don't know if it is more now, but how long have your podcast been going on? I'm really curious to know about that. Has it been a year? Has it been a couple months? Are you approaching 2 or more years? Let me know how long your podcast has been running. So the fun part is naming your podcast. It's time to name your baby. Just came into the world and now you want to name it because this will be the name that it lives with for a very long time, if not forever. So make sure that it is something good. Your podcast should speak to your audience, and ideally your listeners should know what the podcast is about based on the title and maybe a subtitle that comes with the name. Having a very descriptive name can help, but however, do not put an entire sentence as your name. If you want to talk about your favorite restaurants and you want to call it like Dine and Dash, that's completely fine. But don't call it Dining and Dashing when I'm traveling in different areas and I want you guys to know about it. Like, we're trying to figure out what's happening here. That's a lot coming at your audience. So you want to have a hook or a short description that follows your podcast, not specifically in the title, but in the description box, which is an incredibly amazing tool that I will talk about later when it comes to your podcast. And remember, you're going to need to say this podcast name quite a lot, whether it is actually on your show or if you're talking to someone. Like I said, Dine and Dash is cool. It's alliteration, it's catchy, but Dine and Dash as I'm traveling XYZ, blah, 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 you might lose someone who you're talking to. And make sure it rolls off the tongue. And a bonus question, can you turn your podcast name into a hashtag on social media? So my podcast is called That Moment When. My hashtag is TMWPod. It's very easy. It's very simple. It doesn't take up too many characters. If you're promoting something on Twitter, it's very easy. So, all right. So let me see, for those who have podcasts, how long has it been running? Let's see here.
Not everyone has voted yet. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
If you guys didn't see, make sure you vote on the poll how long you've been running your podcast, if ever. If you haven't started one, then I would say maybe vote less than a week because you're going to start this week.
Yes, you are going to start this week. I hope this inspires you too.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, Alicia. Hello, Alicia. I would like to use the podcast to leverage a consulting business in the Fresno area for 18 to 29-year-olds, discussing business, life struggles, motherhood, college, etc. Pretty wide because my team is diverse in age. Well, I love that. It's great to have diversity, and especially if you're working with a team, maybe pull some people in and to talk about specific things. So if you have someone who's in your business who is a mom and working, pull her in for an episode. It goes back to the type of podcast that you want to have, whether it's interview or a co-host or a monologue. So I feel like that's a really good lane to go down if you want to do an interview podcast, because you would be the host, but you're bringing on different people from your team and interviewing them about the things that they're going through and how that ties into your overall message and brand, which is your consulting business. And also, because you know exactly what area you want to be in the Fresno area, maybe think about businesses that are surrounding you in that area that can help you leverage your topic and your episode even more. That's incredible that you have that idea. But it's also, I understand, being on a wide base can be a little mixy sometimes, but having that diversity is key, because now you have ways to extend to a different audience, and you have it all right there in there. You don't have to go outsourcing somewhere else in a different state or a city. You have it all there. Co-host or solo? Yes, Tasha. Co-host or solo is the way to go. I would prefer a co-host, but it's hard to keep other people accountable. I totally understand. So when it comes to having a co-host, you both, if maybe you want to do one or two co-hosts, I would suggest only one, because once you get to 3 people trying to do a show on a consistent basis, it gets kind of hard when you're maybe not living in the same area or your schedules are different. But I would really take the time to try and figure out a time frame that works for you generally. Maybe you guys work during the week, but you're free on a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon. You do sometimes have, when it comes to podcasts, you are giving a lot out there, and you will have to dedicate some time to it, and you might sacrifice your sleeping in Saturdays. But if it's something that you love and something that you really want to do and pursue, it's something that's honestly really worth it. And honestly, if you have an idea for a podcast and you really are very serious about it, if your co-host isn't too serious about it, or they just want to do it more for fun, it's time to be honest and have that communication with them. Really understand where they want to come, where they want to go with this. And you don't have to X them out of the picture altogether. You could do the show, and then the weeks that they are available, have them come in and talk about the topic. Really work through it, if it's possible to do that. Relaunch, okay. I've been thinking about starting a co-host or a solo fantasy football podcast on giving takes, stats, and opinions on everything fantasy football. Incredible. What's your football team, so we can talk about it? But fantasy football is definitely a popular realm, especially right now being in football season. So the biggest thing that you're going to have to ask is, okay, if I do this solo, can I get all of this information in a good amount of time? And how often are you going to host this fantasy podcast? Do you want to do it daily leading up to Football Sunday? Do you want to just do it on the morning of Football Sunday? So kind of like a pre-game kind of fantasy football league, a podcast to talk about what could happen on that Sunday or during that week, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, and kind of really think about that. And try and get as detailed as possible. Oh, you're an Eagles fan? Oh man, we might have some problems here. Coming from the New York area, I am a Giants fan. But yeah, I would really keep those things in mind when you are doing it. And try and find other people who are in the fantasy football community. Ask them to be guests on your show. That'd be really great, because it's leveraging your brand and you're hearing another voice on your podcast. So let's move right along to naming your podcast. We're going to continue with that because it is very important what your podcast is called. A question.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have a hosting style question if you wanted to answer now or.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay. How feasible do you think it is to have a co-host style podcast with a remote secondary host? So it's definitely possible and feasible. With a remote secondary host, are you guys on the same coast? That is going to be very important, because I know that can cause a little miscommunication. If someone is on the East Coast, on the West Coast, you might be off of work, but they still might be at work. So it's good to find a time that works for both of you, whether that's on the weekend or if you don't mind staying up late on a Thursday night and doing that with them. There are plenty of options to help you record. Anchor.fm, like an anchor that's on a ship. .fm is very good for those who have remote co-hosts, because you can literally download the app on your phone, call them up, and record right through there. When you are doing an actual phone call and you're probably trying to record on like a USB or an outside mic, it can get a little wonky with the noise and the audio levels, which I will talk about how important that is as well. But Anchor is a really good tool. And what's really great about Anchor as well is they have some royalty-free music that you can use there to use as an introduction, use as maybe you're doing a topic change, you're about to take a break, or to end your show. That's something that's all available within the app. And Anchor is free, which is great. And I think Anchor will automatically upload all of your episodes to whatever streaming platform you want to. So that's Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, all of those streaming platforms. And I'm not sure if Stitcher is one of them, but those platforms that support podcast streaming, Anchor will upload all of that for you. It will take some time, just like if you were to manually do it through Apple Music or Apple Podcasts rather. So that's definitely something to look into. There was a yes in the Q&A, and I don't know what the yes was for. If that yes was, are you having fun? Then yes, I am here for it. Another Giants fan, yes. Hey there. Hi, how are you holding up this season? Let's talk about your mental health this season. And no problem, CK Brand, you are so welcome for the advice. So going back to naming your podcasts. Should you name your podcast your own name? Unless you already have a following, and I mean a following, or your name is Beyonce or Rihanna, the answer is no. You can incorporate your name into your title. For example, my podcast is That Moment When with Maya Harris, and that's fine. Another Round with Heaven and Tracy, Small Doses with Amanda Seales. That's completely fine. But don't just name your podcast Aaron, because now I'm like, what's Aaron? Who is Aaron? What is Aaron going to be talking about? And I'm just going to just be very confused. So organizing your episodes. Once you have a name and an idea and a topic that you really want to cover with your podcast, now you have to organize your episodes. And I'm going to break this down into 3 different sections because a lot goes into it. So here are some things that you should consider when you're building your show. How long will each episode be? How often will you release new episodes? Should you put them into a season, or should you just have it as a free-for-all and just continue on as long as you want to? So let's start with how long should each episode be? Oh, and question if you want to answer in the Q&A, in the chat, what are the ranges that you would like to listen to your episodes for podcasts? Do you like just 15 to 20 minute ones? Do you prefer 45 minutes to an hour, 3 hours? There are some podcasts that are 3 hours long. So let me know which one you guys prefer, because also what you like to listen to might be the building blocks and the blueprint for how long you want your podcast to be. 45 minutes to an hour of good content. I agree. I feel like that is like such a solid block of time, especially when you have broader topics and interview episodes. You don't want to rush an interview in 25 minutes and people still feel like they want more, like they're still hungry for more information. So I feel like a 45 minute to an hour episode is very, very solid. But then you do have 2 different kinds. You do have short form podcasts, which run about 15 minutes. Through my job, I host a mental health podcast that deals with teens and teens in therapy. And so our episodes run 15 to 25 minutes because I sit down with a therapist. I talk to them about a topic like depression or anxiety. And we do a very general cover of what anxiety may look like in a teenager, what resources are available to them. And we don't get too clinical in it because it is a lot to cover when it comes to mental health. So that is a good just standing range. And then I utilize the description box that I have with each episode, and I drop all of the links that I have mentioned or with other resources so they can do research on their own time when they need to. Long form podcasts run about an hour, and as I said, 45 minutes to an hour is really, really solid, especially when you are talking as a solo host. Talking for an hour is a long time. I am doing it now, and I have my water ready because it is a long time to talk. The good thing with podcasts is that it is pre-recorded, so you can stop re-record whenever you want to. But don't worry too much about these figures. These are more like a guideline. Ultimately, your episode should be decided, your length of your episode should be decided on two things: your content and your audience. Something I like to do before I started my podcast was I would go to Instagram and I'd put out polls. Hey guys, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Or if you don't want to put yourself on the spot, you can say, hey, how long do you guys like your podcast to be? And just put some answers there and let them, answer it for you. You now have a small focus group of your followers, of your peers, of people who are most likely going to be listening and subscribing to your podcast. All right, how often will I release episodes? Release it as frequently as you can on a consistent basis. Now, that can be broken up in all kinds of ways. If you can only manage once a month, that's completely fine. One of the podcasts that I really love, they drop one episode once a month, and it's 25 minutes. It is on the last Thursday of the month, so I know every last Thursday of the month that episode is coming out. And that is consistent. And that's what you need to focus on when it comes to releasing your podcast. Don't release a podcast one on Monday, one on Friday, and the next week on Thursday, because people are never going to know when the podcast is supposed to be coming out. Even if they're subscribed to your podcast and they have the alerts on, people are not going to be able to keep up with it. We have so many other things going on in our lives that as long as we know that, hey, every Wednesday morning, I know X podcast is coming out, they can listen to it on their commute. They can listen to it on their drive as they're running errands. It makes their life easier. And that's what we need to do as podcast hosts, and make the lives of our listeners easier. So if you can manage a month, that's perfectly fine. If you can manage every 2 weeks, even better. That Moment When is a bi-weekly podcast. And let me tell you, those weeks come by quick. Weekly, if you can manage that, that's great. There are people who do daily podcasts. I know NPR is one. The NPR podcasts are a platform that will do daily. The difference between any regular person who wants to start one and NPR or maybe like the New York Times, they have an entire team of people working on content from sun up to sundown. So there's always going to be something in the mix. So unless you have a team at your disposal who can do all that work for you, I would really stay away from a daily podcast because it's hard. It's really hard. If you do a daily podcast that you're getting paid for, more power to you, because getting paid for your podcast is incredible. But at the end of the day, just find out what works for you. So I love a long podcast, 2 to 3 hours, genuine conversation that helps you get immersed in their world, especially if it's only once a week or 2 weeks. So that's good. That's a really good span, even though 2 to 3 hours, just for my listening preference, it's quite a long time. But did this come from the Eagles fan? Of course it did. But, especially if it's an episode that drops maybe once a month or twice a month. Or I'm sorry, you said once a week. That's still really good. Think of it as like your college class that you had once a week. It was probably 2 hours long. There was a lot in that, but you had time to adjust and to listen to all of that and take in your notes once that class was done. So I would look at it like that. If you're going to do a 2 to 3 hour podcast, more power to you. Please have your water ready and don't forget to take breaks because it is a podcast and you can edit it how you want to afterward. Oh, sorry, to season or not to season. So when you start a seasonal podcast, each season will usually have a theme, but not necessarily. Having a season is great because it gives you time off of your podcast. As I mentioned before, you're putting a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy into your podcast. And especially if you're co-hosting with someone who is remote, this is a great time for the both of you to take a breather, to regroup, and get ready for the next season. Maybe you want to release it in 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, it gives you time. So I'm a big fan of having a season because it just gives you time to just step back and prepare for the next season and to go bigger and to go harder and to just really focus on how you want to grow your podcast. Episode titles. Episode titles are important because just like the name of your podcast, they are going to tell your audience a little bit about what they're going to hear as they're listening. So please avoid naming your episodes episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3, and so on and so forth. No one is going to know what you're about to talk about, and probably no one is going to care because it just also looks very unprofessional, and it looks like you did not put a lot of time into your podcast. For my own podcast, I really like to take little quotes and hot takes from maybe what I said or my guest has said and use that as the title. So, for example, I had a really great guest who was talking about how important it is to cultivate a environment and what can grow in your environment. And she said something along the lines of, you can't grow a cactus in New York. And I was like, oh my God, that's my title, because a lot of what we talked about went around cultivating, a space and, finding an area where you grow to be your best self. So my podcast title was You Can't Grow a Cactus in NYC, and then I put with whoever my guest was. And that's how I usually formulate my titles. You can make it very simple as maybe just the topic that you're talking about. For a solo episode that I did, I talked about soul goals, and that was just the name. The name was Soul Goals. And people don't really know what soul goals are, so it intrigued them even more. Be creative and give people a little taste of what they're getting into before they tune in without revealing too much of it. So I'm very interested to know if you were to drop the name of an episode right now, what's something that you would ideally name your episode? Because I think especially when you're in the brainstorming phase, if you can imagine I would really love to have a title of an episode called X, Y, and Z, it can now help you formulate the right type of way to bring that episode to life, whether it's the guests you have on or the topics that you talk about.
I'm curious also, can we have everyone think of your name, your podcast name, if you have it already, or if you don't, think of what you would name your podcast? Because
yes, I understand if you want to keep it a secret and you're like, no, it's too good, I don't want to drop it. I respect it.
Yeah. Let's law of attraction. Put it out there, and then that way.
Exactly. Put it out into the universe, and through this conversation, we are going to just make it grow. So yeah, drop any kind of names of podcasts, of potential podcasts, and anything that you were thinking about. So while you guys do that, I'm going to get into a really important part of your podcast. Your podcast can live up here, but the main ingredient is recording it, putting audio to the ideas and putting it out there for people to consume. So when it comes to having to recording a podcast, you're going to need some really basic equipment. That is a space, that is a microphone, and that is an editing program. Sounds simple, but depending on how deep you want to get into each equipment, it will impact and affect the type of quality you get when it comes to your audio. So the bare minimum you need to record a podcast is a computer with a USB mic and access to the internet if you want to do some research as you're recording. Keep in mind that less expensive or professional equipment may produce low quality sounding audio. And if you're a whiz at audio editing, that's a plus for you. So I'm just actually going to talk about a few pieces of equipment. I started off with a Blue Yeti microphone. I found it and Blue is BLUE. Yeti, Y-E-T-I. And I found this after doing some research about the best podcasting mics to use. I bought it off of Amazon. This is what it looks like. Don't mind my Halloween nails. But it comes in different colors. So it's, I think, white, red, blue, black, and green. This cost me about $80. It was on sale at Amazon, but I think it runs for about $90 to $100. I would say invest in one, because if you're going to be doing a consistent podcast, this is what you're going to be using all of the time. There are plenty of tutorials, very easy tutorials on YouTube that show you how to use the mic. There are different settings depending on where you're recording and what you want to record. So those settings are there. And there's a podcast setting. So it adjusts the mic to just record what's in front of it. I have yet to use this for an interview podcast, because this is mainly something I would do when I'm recording in my room by myself. So when you buy the microphone, you will get the mic. You will also get a USB cord. It's a long, thick white cord. You plug it into your mic and you plug it into the computer that you're recording on, and you're going to pull up GarageBand. For those who are Mac users, GarageBand is automatically put into your Mac, and that's what you can use as well. And you hit record and you can speak. And that's all you have to do. If you want to learn how to adjust audio levels, there are several podcasting and audio level tutorials for you guys to use. But GarageBand makes it very, very simple. I did not go to school for audio engineering or anything like that, but I was able to come up with a few of my earlier podcasts through the Blue Yeti microphone and in my own room, in my own space. If you want to take it a step further and, never. Let me tell you the never, since we talked about the built-in mic, the microphone. Never, ever, ever use your built-in microphone that is on your laptop or your computer. It is very, very muffled. It can be staticky. It is not good. And it doesn't give you that crisp quality that you will need for your podcast. Another thing to maybe add into your Amazon cart when you buy your microphone is a pop filter. That's a POP filter. What that will do, it'll filter out the that you hear when you say P's and your B's and all of that stuff. What it looks like on handheld microphones, that little soft covering, that's a pop filter, and that's what filters that out. The pop filter for this kind of microphone is round, like what you see on a studio microphone when a singer is singing. That's a pop filter. So it's very good to include that when you buy the Yeti microphone or whatever podcast microphone that you feel comfortable buying. Renting studio time. So fortunately, I was able to find a podcasting studio near me that did not cost me an arm and a leg. So every other Monday when I record my show, I will go to the studio. I have an engineer on hand, and that's one of the great things about renting studio time. It obviously is a little more money, but you have all of the proper equipment. You will have more than one microphone. You will have an engineer on hand that'll help you make your podcast sound as pretty as it possibly can. And if you guys have any questions about how to find the right studio, please drop them in the chat. Like, what are some ways that you can find the studio? I can definitely help you guys out with finding studios. Like I said, it is a little more money, but you get top quality audio and editing, and that's what I do with mine. I told my engineer that I could edit the audio myself, because I'd have to pay him a little more money to do the entire episode, but he's helpful enough where anything that he notices in the episode, maybe I fumbled over a word, I had to pause and start over, he will edit that out himself, but everything else is on me. What you can use to edit your podcast is GarageBand, as I said before, and Audacity. Both are free and both are very easy to use. Audacity you can download from their website. GarageBand, like I said, if you are a Mac user, should automatically be in there for you. So Do you guys, for those who have podcasts, are you guys using a USB microphone like the Blue Yeti or maybe something similar? Or are you guys in a studio space using professional equipment that is provided in the space? Let me know. And also, if you guys are in the same area as someone else, like I know we have a couple people who are in NYC, if you have any podcasting studio resources, share that with them. This is what this is all about. It's to get people engaged and to share the information with them. So the music is very important with your podcast because it adds flavor to your show. I know there are several podcasts. For example, Call Your Girlfriend is a podcast I like. And every time that I know I'm about to listen, I'm hearing the theme song and I'm singing it in my head because it's so catchy. I know that when I hear it, it's Call Your Girlfriend. And so it gives just another personality to your podcast. There's no rule that says that you need to have music on your podcast. But like I said, it does add another level of identity and personality to your podcast, and I highly suggest that you do. And it adds a layer of professionalism to your podcast because I know if I hear something with music, I'm like, oh, they took time to do this, and they really thought this through. So there are a couple resources that you can use for music. There are stock royalty-free music is available online for free $99. YouTube has them if you type in a specific type of vibe that you're looking for. For example, royalty-free lo-fi hip-hop beats. Type that into YouTube and a plethora of outcomes will come up for you guys. And you can use it as much as you need to. It's royalty free. No one will come knocking on your door trying to sue you for using their music. If you do like a song that someone has created, I would reach out to them and see if you can get, the rights to use that. You will have to draw up some contracts, do a lot of legal research for that, because that can get really tricky. Now, I know that a lot of times people, especially when they have maybe pop culture podcasts, they like to talk about a song that just released. So maybe Bruno Mars dropped a new track and you want to talk about it. You are allowed to, and I make sure I research this very, very heavily for you guys. You are allowed to use part of it, but the rule is you can use, I think, 10 to 15 seconds, and it's only for parody reasons and when you're doing reviews on a song. You cannot use it as your intro or as your outro song because you're not associated with the artist or their company or anything like that. So if you want to talk about a song, you can use the small snippet from it. I would really try and be very mindful of how you're using it because that can get really tricky if you are not using it in a proper form. You can make or outsource personalized music. I had someone create my music for me. They did some tracks that were sent to me, and I picked the one that I liked the most. If you feel like you can make your own music in GarageBand or some other music producing program, please feel free to do that. If you want to remix a song, go ahead and do that. But like I said, if you are remixing, be mindful of the sample that you are using when you're putting it into, your own theme music. Right, and cover art, another big thing with your podcast. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but when it comes to podcast art, that's all we do. If we see something that just looks very unappealing, we're probably not going to listen to it. It's the first experience that users have with your podcast before they even hit subscribe or play. So you really want to make sure that it is eye-catching and appealing, but also relates to the things that you're going to be talking about. If you're going to be talking about your travels to European countries, you don't want to throw a random penguin on your cover because I don't know what penguins have to do with Europe. Unless you can, in the title, unless you're talking about it, like the traveling penguin is your title and you want a penguin on a plane, then that's perfectly fine. But you have to make sure it's cohesive and that it all makes sense to you. If your cover art is pixelated, the text is too tiny, or there's too much of it and the colors don't match, many people will just scroll past it. You have almost 3 seconds to grab someone's attention while they're scrolling through endless podcast titles in their catalog, so make yours stand out. If you guys want to know how you can make your podcast art stand out, what are some resources that you can use? How can you get personalized cover art? Drop that in there in the chat, and I'll try to answer those as well. And it's important to know that the podcast cover art dimension has to be 3,000 by 3,000 pixels. If you have a podcast already and you're looking to upload in Apple Podcast, when you go to submit your podcast, it will give you that warning. And anywhere else that you do podcast, that is the standard. So make sure that you guys keep that in mind. Canva is a beautiful, beautiful resource to create cover art. I am a big fan of Canva myself. Canva is free to start off with. If you guys want to get a little more access to some of the things that are on Canva, you do have to pay for it. But their free subscription comes with so many amazing resources. And I believe that they already have a place for you that's 3,000 by 3,000 pixels. So your dimensions are already planned out for you. So I think that they have something like that for you. Canva is an incredible source. I use that on my podcasting social media. At that moment when pod on Instagram, I use Canva all over the place. So my entire thing is Canva. So that's a really great point to bring up. How do you find cover art with your photo on it versus no photo, just text? Are you asking what do I think about it, or are both attractive? So they can definitely both be attractive. When it comes to using your face, if you want to use an actual photograph, I would get your photograph professionally done and make sure that it is a PNG. So the background is transparent, so you can drop and paste your face, your image anywhere on whatever background, and it'll just cohesively go with it. I know that when it comes to podcasts that do have a specific person's face, it's usually just them, it's their podcast, their name is on it, and they're going to be the main co-host. For my podcast, That Moment When, I actually found an artist in the UK who did a comic book illustration of me, which was really cool. I thought that it would be more attention grabbing. It's this cool little comic book character with Afro puffs, and I loved it. I think both are attractive if they are done well. What I suggest that you do is create a couple covers using either your likeness or just the title of your podcast and some maybe designs, and drop it on your social media. Or ask your friends if you don't want to put it on a bigger platform like social media. Ask people who are going to be part of your audience, hey, if you saw this in a podcasting catalog, would you be interested in listening to it? Or just send them two things, what catches your eye more? And then really start to build an understanding based on that. Your friends, your followers on Instagram, those are potential listeners, and that is your own focus group in there, which is so special because that's going to be probably your biggest support system right there. So these are a few cover art examples that I pulled, and I love Slow Burn by Slate because one, you can tell who that is right away. You know what president that is. And you can kind of just get an understanding of what they're going to be talking about. Like whatever it's talking about is going to be a slow burn. There's going to be build up in the episodes and the topics. There's the element of something being on fire, which plays with the burn aspect. So they're playing with the images and the word and their title, which is extremely good to go hand in hand. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, they have the podcasting, whether it's like their program or whatever it is. So like NPR, Gimlet, Slate, that's on there. Every little thing. I have no idea what this podcast is about, but I thought it was extremely cute, and it just gives you a dynamic way of how you want to just position things. So as you can see, the title isn't just going from left to right, it is going in kind of like a little loop semicircle kind of curve thing. And then you see rabbit ears, and then Gimlet. So you know Gimlet is the podcast where it's coming from. Every little thing is the title. Maybe it has something to do with a rabbit. I don't know. So I just thought that it grabbed my attention. NPR's Hidden Brain. So you know right up here, NPR is the platform that it's coming from. Hidden Brain. Now it's very subtle if you pay attention. The E is hidden, and so is the A in Hidden Brain. So like I said, it's playing on the image and the title of the podcast itself, which is just really, really creative. Of course, with platforms like NPR, Gimlet, and Slate, they do have a massive team that works with them. So there are graphic designers, there are marketing people who work with this. So I understand if you don't have a marketing background or a graphic design background, but I'm sure they did the same thing that I told you before. They put something together and they sent it out to the people in their company, and they were just like, what do you think of this? Or they had a focus group and said, what do you think of this? You know, when you see this, what do you think? And it's important for you to utilize that when you are building your podcast. So that was a lot of information to take in. I understand that, but please, if you have any questions on anything that I talked about or anything that that wasn't mentioned here, please feel free to ask, and I will try and answer your questions as best to my ability. I can be found, my personal Instagram can be found at MayaPapaya_23, and my podcast Instagram is That Moment When Pod. And please listen to That Moment When with Maya Harris every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. I will also, I don't know if Tasha, you want to, or I will drop the link to that so people can find it. If they, if you can go through my social media as well if you want to. But please feel free to ask away. Let's see, I did see someone talk about co-working offices. Oh, your co-working office in LA has a studio. That's perfect. Co-working spaces are so important. There is one, if you are in New York, I know that there is one in Newark. They have a co-working space that does have a really, really awesome podcasting studio in there. I never recorded in there, but I walked around and kind of sat in the studio, and it's really, really good as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this. I really appreciate it, and I am ready for all the questions that you have to ask. Will there be a PowerPoint in the presentation provided to all attendees? I can definitely attach this if people want to.
Yeah, so I will send out the replay of the webinar tomorrow to everyone who joined. And also, I'm sure we could be able to include a PDF of this PowerPoint as well, because there was some really good information in there. And yes, Maya, please put your links in the chat below so everyone can join. Do you think you need this is a question for you, Maya.
Do you think you need a separate Insta for your podcast, or can you start by just advertising on your personal? You can definitely start by advertising on your personal. I know I personally don't like to mix what I do on my personal brand with my podcasting brand, because just the kind of aesthetic I use for my podcast is different from my personal Instagram. So in the beginning, please feel free to post it as much on your feed, on your story, get your friends to post it, and you can direct people to your personal Instagram. But once you start getting a couple episodes under your belt, I would really start thinking about planning to do other means for where your podcast can live. So I think a separate Instagram is extremely important. And it's also really good because you can link the two. For example, I, on my bio, on my personal one, I have the @that moment when pod in my bio. So if I'm talking about something on my podcast, I can say, go to the link in my bio or something in my bio. People go to my page and go there, and it's very easy for them to get to. So in the beginning, like I said, you can definitely just post it all onto your personal. But once this podcast gets moving and it's a serious thing, I would really consider hosting it on a new social media page.
Yes. Okay, yeah, we definitely send out. Make sure, if you're not already, go to our website to make sure that you are subscribed to our email list, because we will be sending out the recaps to that list. So I'm sending the link now. Just make sure you subscribe. Make sure you are following us on all of our socials. Make sure you're following Maya. And yeah.
Yeah, and also just to go back to that social media one, it's also good if you want to direct people to maybe drop questions about or for your podcast or about your podcast. I don't know how you feel about getting all kinds of DMs to your personal one, but it's a good thing to just separate your personal DMs and your business podcast DMs. It'd be good to have it to live in a separate space so people can just go straight there and, you know, drop any questions that they have for you in there. So actually, let me drop a couple links in here myself. This is my blog and website that I'm about to send to you guys. So I also have some written work in there. I have to revamp my blog, but all my information, all the podcast information is there. What do you think about videotaping your podcast? I know some people do it. Yes, I do think that it is a good thing to video your podcast. I actually was talking to Tasha about this right before we went live with you guys. It is very important to have two sources of visuals. So you don't, let's say you're doing a solo podcast. You don't just want to have the camera to the side of you and getting your profile, because after about 7 minutes, 10 minutes of just watching the side of your face, it can get kind of boring. I'm not saying you have a boring face. I'm sure your face is lovely, but people just don't have that kind of attention span. So it's very important to have a camera that is also in front of you, and it gives just people a dynamic of what's going on in the studio. The best example I can give to you is Dear White People on Netflix. They do an incredible job of capturing different angles while Sam is in the studio hosting her radio show. I'm not saying that you need to have a Dear White People budget when it comes to your camera, but if you want to have one iPhone here and maybe borrow an iPhone from someone else, you can have there. It's very good to have that. And then also, if you are very big into video editing, you can edit it all together to make it flow and it'll look so nice. I tried doing video for the first time with a podcast, and it was just profile, which was a really big mistake. So I'm telling you from my own personal mistakes, avoid the just the one profile. If you want to do just a face on camera for your first time, I'd rather you that than a profile one. And it's really good because now people have a face to the name and the voice, which is really good as well. And a lot of people love video. Video is very captivating. You can see people's emotions, and it's really great. And now you just add another platform to promote your podcast, which is YouTube or IGTV or something like that. So it's extremely important to try and leverage that as much as you can. But to say all of that, you do not need to have video. I understand maybe for just expenses and like what you guys are willing to money you're willing to spend on this, I completely understand. It can get a little pricey when you start hiring people to get your visuals for your podcast.
What if, I have a question. So say someone wants to do they want to have guests on their podcast, but they don't have the budget to fly in their guests or go to travel. What are your thoughts on over the phone podcast episodes as far as sound quality goes?
Yeah, so I personally don't like it. I've had to do a couple of phone-ins just because I've had guests from California, Arizona, Atlanta, and I do not have the budget to just be flying people out here. Um, so I understand that sometimes you don't have the choice but to do it, which is completely fine. You know, you have to work with what you can work with. In terms of audio, it is going to be a little tricky because you're now working with an outside source. Um, and now they may be on the move, they may be in a bad area, so you're going to just like hear glitches now and then. There are going to be some awkward pauses. Also, you're not seeing the person, so you're not fully sure when they're done speaking. You may talk over each other. That's completely understandable and that's fine, but here's the beauty of it. It is a podcast that is pre-recorded. If you do need to re-ask a question because the person was still answering the other one and you thought they were done, you can take a moment and say, hey, I would like to re-record that question because I was talking over you or your audio went in and out. And you can definitely do that. And just give your guest a warning like, hey, because this is a call-in, audio might be going up and down. So, you know, if I have to re-ask some questions and ask you to re-answer some things, just let me know if that is okay. So the audio will be speakerphone to mic. So so what you can do, I know if you're going to be in a studio will have an aux cord and you can plug that into your laptop and you can call the person through your laptop, whether that's FaceTime or Google Hangouts or whatever you're using to call your guest. That is hooked up straight to your recording device that's in your studio. When it comes to calling, let's say you're doing this at home, I would highly suggest looking into Anchor because this is now a phone call that is a direct app instead of you just having a microphone here and having your guest on your phone and trying to hold it here. I would do a test run before if that is your only option. So, you know, get a friend to call you or something and just do a test run on the mic and see how that works. But yes, if that is going to be the road you're going to go down, you're going to have to put your phone on speaker and hold it close to the mic as much as you can. But again, really look into Anchor because that's just a phone, that's just recording through an app through two phones. So that's a useful tool.
Would you need 2 Yeti mics if you were having a guest on in person?
Yeah, so you can, you kind of broke up a little, but I think I heard your question. So would I need to use 2 Yeti microphones if I am recording 2 people? If you want everyone to have their own microphone and the sound to be super, super crisp, yes, I suggest every guest have their own microphone. Yet I understand dropping $200 or more on a microphone and a pop filter is very expensive. What you can do is there is a setting that will allow you to have a conversation. So if I am sitting here, there is the setting that will open up the other side of the mic and the person sitting across from me can talk to them. That side of the mic as well. But like I said, everything is trial and error. I have yet to test that on this microphone because I do have a studio space. I've only used the one-way side of this microphone, but that is definitely something that is an option available to you.
I was muted. Okay, well,
I'm not sure
all for today. Can you all hear me or am I?
Oh wait, I think you're frozen, Tasha.
No, can you hear me now?
Oh no, I don't know if.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I think that is it. Let's get off before we lose this recording.
Okay.
But yeah, I just wanted to just share our information because we do have another webinar scheduled for next week. We will be doing a lot more of these useful webinars, and I hope that you guys are really enjoying them. So this is our social media. Make sure you are following us if you're not already. We're going to be doing more of these webinars, like I said, and just more content after today. I'm inspired to even do a podcast. Thanks.
Yes, please.
And also events and things like that. So just stay connected. Do we have one more question? I know somebody on Instagram told you happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad this was helpful, and I really, really look forward to your podcast in the future. If you have any questions or anything that maybe you think of after this is done, please feel free to DM me. I'll drop my social information in there as well for you guys. And any more questions or any ideas that you have and you want me to be part of your focus group, let me know. I'm definitely more than happy to help anyone out.
Definitely. And like I said, we'll send the recap email out tomorrow. If you get any gems or anything that stuck out to you, feel free to post those on social media, tag us, tag Maya, and let us know what you thought. So yes, thank you once again, Maya, and enjoy New Orleans.
Thank you so much. I will have so much fun eating all the great food.
Yes. All righty, everyone. Well, enjoy the rest of your Monday night, and we will talk soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.